What is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. Joining me tonight is just Tyler. Alex is out with med school things tonight. He is not on the injury report, unlike half of the whole Chargers team that we'll get into. But Tyler, how you doing, man? And what's up with the UCI stuff lately?
Well, I go to UCI, so thanks for paying attention to where I go to school. What college do you like again? Was it BYU? No, I'm doing very, very well. I sat through classes today for student teaching, sat through Zoom class for the program. Now I'm here. So 13th hour, good to go, man. I got my coffee in me, doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a day. I've talked about this before, so I record from my in-laws' house now because we moved into a new house. It's a new development, and we do not have the capability to have internet yet. So we signed an addendum when we first moved in to acknowledge that we were not going to have internet for like 2 weeks. That turned into 30 days. And then that turned into 90 days. So we are not going to have internet or cable until November. So have to keep recording at my in-laws' house for the next month or so. So it's great.
That feels like a challenge. Like, would you rather do this or have no internet for
Right.
3 months? And you've just done that, not by choice, but you've endured this for quite a while. So respect to Steven, you and everyone in the chat should know, like, Steven's been having to deal with this and work with this, and he still shows up and does his job. So keep at it, man. You're almost there, I think.
I know. I was talking with Brooke, and she was like, well, we've done it for 2 months, so it's another month. And I was like, another month? Like, but luckily I have a great relationship with my in-laws. They're cool with me kind of still in a room for recording purposes. So can't thank the Bowman family enough. But so obviously here to preview the Chargers upcoming matchup with the Seattle Seahawks. Going to dive into everything that happened, during their offseason, their new coaching staff. Obviously, we're 6 weeks into the season, third of the way through. But we'll have a lot to talk about there, talk about their rookie class, and then, as we always do, key matchups and things like that. Unfortunately, like I said, we do have to talk about the injury report today, and it is a lengthy one. So first and foremost, sounds like Keenan Allen again is not going to play this week, according to Daniel Popper. They are electing to give him another week off, essentially 2 weeks off because of the Chargers bye week, and then hopefully be fully healthy against the Falcons in week 9. So he's not the only pass catcher that is dealing with something. Donald Parham and Joshua Palmer both have concussions. Josh Palmer is, obviously a lot of people talking about Donald Parham, and rightly so, for what happened last year. Josh Palmer also had a concussion in the preseason. That's why he missed the final game of the preseason. So this is his second concussion of the year. Obviously, Donald Parham's second concussion in the last calendar year. Either way, not ideal. And then also Gerald Everett has an illness, did not practice today. So it sounds like Gerald Everett should be fine. Then again, Corey Lindsey was supposed to be fine as well. But this Chargers skill position, man, we haven't even talked about Joshua Kelly yet, who's potentially out for a month with the knee injury. But this Chargers skill position room, if you want to call it that, is hurting in a very, very bad way right now.
Yeah, not great. This is the second time. Not only has Palmer had the second concussion this year, but it's days after the game. It's not even just like he gets taken out of the game. All of a sudden, 1-2 days later, it's like, oh, Palmer had a concussion. He's in the concussion protocol. Not great. I don't say I was suspicious that he had one, but after some of the hits that he took, whether it's the 37th screen he caught or whatever, it just seemed like he's taken a lot of hits, a lot of punishment, especially for a guy who had a knee issue and ankle issue going into the game, even though he did practice in full. But for it to be a concussion, that's rough. I don't know if he had one last year, but 2 already in such a short span, that's no good. Donald Parham with the concussion as well. Obviously not the same kind of concussion, but no concussion is a good concussion. Yeah. That's worrisome. But just, man, the dreaded illness popped up. I believe there was a player for Seattle, I can't recall who also has some sort of illness as well. So I don't know if there's something going around or what. Again, they don't specify whether it's COVID or something, but with Corey, it was food poisoning. So I don't know what it is for Gerald Everett, but hopefully he's okay, because I don't want to see Trey McKitty as the starting tight end, because that's not a thing that should happen for the Chargers. I would rather sign somebody else, or just flip Richard Rodgers over to be the starter. They're going to go through a lot right now. And it seems like the defense is mostly healthy. Obviously, no Joey Bosa. Sebastian Joseph Day was limited. But I feel like they're going to be about the same as they were against the Broncos. It's going to be another week where the defense has to carry the offense. And as much as we want to see different things from the offense or for them to be better, they just have to survive because they're running out of bodies, and everything involved in their run game, everything that they could do in the passing game, that all might be gone against the Seahawks, who are arguably the second best offense they'll be facing for some time. So, which is, again, the whole thing we'll get into, but it's going to be tough. They'll need everything they can from this defense this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you mentioned, we'll dive into that. Noah Fant, the Seahawks tight end, is the one with the illness. So I don't know if that was something from last week, but yeah. So like I said, obviously Joshua Kelly not practicing, supposedly out for at least 2 weeks. The good news there obviously is that there is the bye week. Same with Dustin Hopkins. Both of those two players diagnosed initially with the same kind of time frame of 2 to 4 weeks. So shout out Dustin Hopkins. He won AFC Special Teams Player of the Week, and deservedly so. But yeah, he's got a hamstring injury, another hamstring for the Chargers, which is great. But we'll see what happens with Taylor Bertolet. If it is a 4-week injury, like I said, the bye week could prevent them from having to place him on IR. But we'll see Taylor Bertolet at least for this upcoming week, and then likely the Falcons game as well. So that's the kicking situation now with Hopkins and Taylor Bertolet.
Yeah, what a mild blessing that we got to see Bertolet at least in some action. Now, does making previous kicks mean you're going to make the next ones if you've never had experience in the NFL? No, like this isn't Justin Tucker here or anything, but I do feel a bit better that they have another option in their back pocket just in case there's something up with Hopkins and he can't come back in 2-3 weeks, whatever it ends up being. But not great for him to have a potentially 4-week injury and have played on that and hit a game winner, hit several field goals that were all needed. Really, really impressive for Hopkins, man.
Yeah, and like I said, getting a lot of deserved praise. He wasn't on the show for Pat McAfee, but they were talking about him. So it was pretty cool to see. And then got the report that he's going to be out for 2 to 4 weeks. So we'll see what happens there. Kicking with your hamstring on your plant leg, to me, probably is going to be a longer term injury than the 2 weeks. And we know how obviously the Chargers kind of take it easy. So we'll see what happens, right? I feel like they probably should place him on IR and then just sign Taylor Bertolet to the active roster. And like you said, I feel like we can at least have some confidence in Bertolet's ability to come in and kick consistently. So other than that, we'll see. There weren't any other DNPs. Will Clapp does have a quad injury. He was limited in practice today. It sounded like they expect him to be fine, although he was pretty shaken up when he walked off the field. So not sure about that one. Sebastian Joseph Day, like you mentioned, limited participant today. And then Trey Pipkins limited as well. So, Trey is absolutely somebody that I think needs to get through this bye week. Theoretically should be healthier this week than he was last heading into Monday Night Football, of course. But, him dealing with a short week, that to me is like, of anybody that is potentially going to play hurt, like Pipkins is the one that I'm like most concerned about his, being able to do his job properly.
Yeah, 100%. If Lindsley's back and there's no designation for him on the report, right? So I think he's back, and it's not like an injury. So
yeah,
should be good there. Pipkins, yeah, would love to see him at least a little bit better than he was last week. Didn't seem like he went through any setbacks, but obviously he was not 100%. You don't go from, and I get it's a small sample size for Pipkins. So again, there could be an avalanche on the way. I don't know, but for him to go from, I think 7 pressures on the entire year to 5 in one game and a sack, you could tell. Like, yes, he was facing a good edge rusher. Don't get me wrong, but you could tell he was just not the same guy. So him being, on a short week, or not short, well, yeah, on a short week with this potential injury, going up against Uchenna Nwosu, who I'm sure would love to revisit Trey Pipkins a few times. Yeah, that'll be a tough one for sure.
Yeah, Trey Pipkins and I forget their Darrell Taylor, I think it is. So this isn't like a great edge rusher duo, but it's solid. It'll give Pipkins some challenges if he's not close to 100%. So from the Seattle side of things, not a ton to talk about. Obviously, the big one to keep an eye on there is Tyler Lockett did not practice today with a hamstring injury. Gabe Jackson also did not practice, their starting guard, who of course we're familiar with from his days with the Raiders. He did not practice with knee/hip injuries. So those are the two big ones. Chenna Nwosu didn't practice today. That was more like a veteran day off, but obviously the Seahawks probably should end up being a little healthier than the Chargers heading into this game.
Yeah, good for them. If Lockett is out, who do you know who their? I should have looked this up, but who is their third receiver? It's not Bo Melton, is it? He's buried.
No, Bo Melton's on the practice squad.
Oh,
so they actually cut him. I wish that the Chargers would have, scooped him up, but we'll see what happens there. I think it's been Marquise Goodwin, Dwayne Eskridge, some combination there. They're really looks like they're really heavy on like double tight end sets and things like that. So if you look at their, at least from a snap percentage from like pass catching or just total like passing snaps, it's like DK, Tyler Lockett, then it's like Noah Fant, Will Dillsley, and Colby Parkinson after that. So we'll get Arjun's full report tomorrow, but sounds like the Seahawks kind of do a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets.
Yeah, I mean, they traded for one. There's not a lot of guys. I mean, obviously DK, obviously Lockett, not a lot of crazy standouts there, but some dudes, like some good dudes on offense who could just do some damage, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah. Yeah, this sounds like it's a game that's going to be in the 30s again, or at least close to it, but we'll get into it. All right, we'll do our usual presentation on the Seattle Seahawks additions, coaches, draft class, all of that stuff. Again, we're 6 weeks into the season, so it's going to be a bit more of a check-in to see how this team is doing, deep dive, and as always, Tyler bringing the heat today with a Twilight graphic. So I should have expected a Twilight thing, right? Because a couple weeks ago we had like Disney fairy tale thing. So for our audio audience, I would definitely encourage you to come on YouTube and at least check out the graphics for today. But
yeah, you know me, big Twilight and fairy tales guy.
Did you watch the Twilight series when you were in high school?
Oh, 100%. I have 3 younger sisters, so I watched that. Yeah. I went to the movies to watch them. Yeah, good stuff.
Were you were you on a side? Did you have a team or not that into it?
I guess I was team Edward because I thought Jacob was just mildly obnoxious and moody. I thought Edward was slightly less obnoxious and moody. Frankly, I was on the side of the final battle they had in the part 2, whatever that movie was, where everyone died. That's what I was on the side of. I was on the side of just sheer terror but also happiness watching fan favorites die. But then they didn't end up actually dying, which was worse.
I was working out in our garage like a week ago, and I had like a 2000s rock playlist on my phone going, and that Muse song from when they're at the baseball. And Brooke heard the song and she came out and she was like, "Why are you watching Twilight?" I'm like, "I'm working out. Why would I be watching Twilight?"
To get motivation, they take off their shirts and like, I want to be like Jacob. I get it.
Oh man, good stuff as always, Tyler. So yeah, we'll jump right into the coaching staff. Oh my goodness. All right, so obviously the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks is Mr. Pete Carroll. Been in the league for quite some time, of course. I'm sure most of our Los Angeles listeners are familiar with his work. But he's made quite a few coaching changes that have been surprising over the last couple of years, because he's been historically known to be kind of stubborn and stuck in his ways. But obviously heading into last season, he hired Shane Waldron away from the Rams. Brandon Staley also tried to hire him as offensive coordinator. So Shane Waldron, very well versed in the Shanahan McVay kind of offense, if you will. They're going to do a lot of wide zone, a lot of motion, a lot of bootlegs. So pretty similar offense overall to kind of what the Chargers are doing, minus the emphasis on stick. But overall, seems like Shane Waldron doing a good job over there. And then defensively, Clint Hurt, and they also hired Sean Desai, who used to be the defensive coordinator in Chicago. So Hurt and Desai bringing over a lot of the Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley principles. So this is really kind of mirror images from a schematic standpoint, at least, certain parts of it, of course, like I said. So, the Seahawks are pivoting away from the old school 4-3 cover 3 emphasis defensive scheme that obviously took over the league, and now they're kind of transitioning to this new age defense where they're going to be running a 3-4, do a lot of too high safety looks, mix and match coverages. So it's been really interesting to see. Obviously, the Seahawks defense not great statistically just yet. So I'll definitely pencil them in for some defensive draft picks next year. But as somebody who is just kind of a fan of good coaching, I think it shows a lot about Pete Carroll, that he's willing to kind of take on these new styles this late in his career and kind of adapt to what's happening in the NFL. So, that's the Seattle Seahawks coaching staff.
And those new styles and everything they're doing, it's working for them. I really thought this coaching staff, I thought the Pete Carroll era was over. Obviously, they didn't fire him yet, but I thought, Wilson was just ending his career with the Seattle Seahawks. They weren't doing so hot. I mean, they did go 12-4 in 2020, but it just seemed like this is where we were headed. And frankly, Pete Carroll is, I believe, it's the oldest head coach in the league right now. So it's not like this was maybe sustainable for a very long time. And yet, here we are looking at this team and genuinely worried about them because they've made good moves on offense, on defense, in the draft for future picks as well. They made good moves in free agency, not a ton, but enough. And we'll talk about those in a bit. This team is really, I don't want to say turned itself around because they are only 3-3, but they are far, far better than I ever would have guessed heading into this year. And kudos to Pete Carroll and everybody else for putting that together.
Yeah, I mean, their overall predicted win total heading into the season, I think, was 6.5. So they're really ahead of schedule right now. And we'll get next to kind of their offseason moves. And you can really kind of see the vision kind of coming together. Obviously, the Russell Wilson trade, really the biggest move of the offseason. They get Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and draft picks, as well as Shelby Harris as kind of the draft picks for Russell Wilson, and then obviously adding Uchenna Nwosu, Quandre Diggs in there as well. They picked up the Rams center Austin Blythe. So they didn't have a ton of losses outside of Russell Wilson. Obviously, Gerald Everett coming over, which has been a good move for us. And then, they lose DJ Reed to the Jets. So they're a young team, specifically on defense, specifically in the trenches on offense. But they took this free agency period and draft period and kind of did a soft reset. It seemed like, from the perspective of from us, from the casual public, right, that this was going to be a full-on rebuild. But this coaching staff, this front office has really turned this into like a soft reset. They've made some really solid moves. Uchenna Nwosu on pace for his first 50 plus total pressure season. Essentially increasing his production by about half a pressure a game from what he was with the Chargers last year, which is not necessarily a surprise. Most pass rushers do peak on their second contracts. So Uchenna's playing well. Quandre Diggs playing really well. They don't use Noah Fant a ton. But other than that, their free agency additions and losses, I think, are obviously panning out for them so far.
Yeah, Uchenna Nwosu, I believe, is a $10 million a year deal. Pretty solid, and it's paying off for them. And I just, not that it really matters, but I do look on Twitter and see what are the reactions to like Nwosu and how he's playing. And I do the same for Kaiser White. Like, how are the fans embracing him? And they seem to love Uchenna Nwosu. They love his motor. They love his hustle. I believe he had a rest day so far this week. So it sounds like they're playing him a bit more than they maybe intended to, but he's playing pretty well as far as I can tell. I believe he did force that fumble on Melvin Gordon. I've only watched one Seattle game this year, and it was that game against the Broncos, and he looked great. He looked like the best of what we saw from Uchenna Nwosu with the Chargers, and that's really paying off. But like you said, like a nice soft reset for them. I thought it was a rebuild. I thought they were going to have Drew Lock. He was going to start. They were going to suck, and they were going to, accumulate picks, and they already had picks, and find their quarterback next year, and they still might. Again, it's only 6 games in, but they are suddenly in a spot where if they sort of wanted to, and with where the Rams look and the Niners are kind of 50-50 and the Cardinals not being so hot, they could legitimately challenge for the playoffs in the NFC West, which again, I would not have expected. So credit to them and these free agent pickups.
I mean, even if they're not challenging for the division, like I think the NFC, it's a total toss up right now. I mean, the Giants are 5-1, and like none of us would have expected that. So
Yeah.
they're in a position to make this really interesting. And as NSN points out, and as we'll get to in here in a second, they still have 4 draft picks in the top 100 at least next year. So they're set up for the future. They're set up for right now. I mean, weirdly enough, this is kind of like a textbook soft reset. Like I said, be able to continue to compete as well as building for the future.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's talk about this draft class, which I liked. A lot of the players in here we had talked about several times for the Chargers at different spot. Yeah, if you get the look at all those chickens vine or whatever that is, great. If you don't, maybe I'm slightly older than you or something. Yeah, so the 2 picks they got from the Seahawks for this year, at least the 2 notable ones, one turned into Boye Mafe. The other one, I believe, was Charles Cross. So, hey, that's a pretty good start. As far as Cross and Lucas go, they've been solid. I think Rashawn Slater has kind of spoiled us and the rest of the world with how a tackle could be coming out. But again, 25 pressures and 5 sacks allowed between the two over the course of 6 games is really solid. And Seattle, listen, they, whether you think these are the better prospects, I think you and I had a different offensive tackle number 1. You like Lucas more than I did, but I still really like Lucas. Don't get me wrong. But they really did find 2 of maybe the 4 best pure pass protecting tackles in the class, if not 2 of the 3 best, honestly, because Lucas was outstanding as well. And those early returns that they're getting from these guys is part of the reason why their offense has been so successful. So for them to get Cross, get Lucas, 2 bookends, and they're set on 2 bookend tackles on rookie deals, I mean, come on, that's outstanding for them. Tariq Woolen has really been in the 5th round the talk of the town, especially because of the 4 interceptions, and I believe there was 2 like forced fumbles or something to start the year. You do have Woolen, you do have Bryant. I know you like Kobe Bryant more than I did. I think we all either I don't remember if you watched Woolen or not, but I think we all just didn't like Tariq Woolen all that much. Not because there wasn't potential there was, but it was just the film wasn't that great. I mean, I watched him get toasted by Bailey Zapp in Western Kentucky, and here we are though. Like people are saying, Tariq Woolen could potentially be defensive, rookie of the year, and while I don't think that'll happen, he's certainly been one of their best surprises. Even though I know Arjun's coverage metrics don't say that Woolen is a great corner right now, but still, like what you're getting from him with those 6 takeaways or forced turnovers or whatever it is, that's really good. So Woolen and Bryant have given up 200 yards, about 200 yards each so far. Woolen does have 6 penalties on him with 2 declined, but still, overall, they're getting great returns across Lucas, Woolen, Bryant, really, really good. And they finally just started to get some real returns on Kenneth Walker, who I laughed at them, honestly, when they took Kenneth Walker, because it's not like this was a team that had everything figured out. And again, we had no idea they would be this competitive early on, but they had Chris Carson, they had Rashad Penny. And then why were you taking Kenneth Walker in the 2nd round? Not that he's a bad player, just why would you take another running back? Of course, you find out with Chris Carson with the injury, he's no longer. Did he retire officially, or he's just out for the year?
He retired, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Chris Carson retired. And so now Rashad Penny's out for the year. And suddenly, hey, guess what? We have an RB1 still with Kenneth Walker. Results of a process, I suppose. Less than 10 carries a week heading into, this past week. Finally got a big start last week. 21 carries, 97 yards, and a touchdown. It's going to be a challenge for this Chargers defense, because I didn't think he wasn't our RB1 or I think even RB2 or maybe even RB3 for us.
I think he was Alex's RB3.
Okay. I think he was my RB4, if I'm not mistaken, or RB3. I don't remember where I had him between him and Pierce. The thing about him is, inarguably, when he hit the open field, when he got a chance to get to the 2nd level, he was as dynamite as anybody else in this class. He was very, very difficult to go get, a real angle breaker for defenses. And you saw that, I believe, on either a screen or a swing pass last week against the Cardinals. He's just very tough in the open field. So the Chargers have a lot on their plates this upcoming week. The only guy that really isn't getting what they probably wanted was Boye Mafe. And I think collectively across the board for all three of us, but definitely you and I, weren't huge fans of Boye Mafe. We're more of like, we'll take a little bit more technical refinement and a pass rush plan over pass rush, upside. And someone like Boye Mafe, only 3 pressures so far in 6 games on 71 pass rush reps. Now you take him because you can build him and develop him. And listen, they're doing it with Tariq Woolen. They're doing it with some of the other guys. But 3 pressures for a second round pick right now isn't that great. But still, that's doing more with their second pick than the Chargers are. So, hey, good for you.
Yeah, I mean, we talk obviously in the draft process, right? You're trying to get 3 starters from each draft. You're trying to get 2 role players after that. So I think unquestionably this is the best draft the Seahawks have had in quite some time. So Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas have each had their rookie moments, right? Similar thing with Zion Johnson. But they've flashed a lot of high level football. Even Brandon Thorne, who was I don't want to say against Abe Lucas, but he was not high on him at all, has come out and said several times that Lucas is playing really great football and in his opinion is the best rookie offensive tackle right now. So Lucas is playing well, Charles Cross is playing well. If that's all this draft class was, like you kind of call it a success again, a few months ago, right? Because you get 2 starting offensive tackles, but then you add in 2 starting corners for them, Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's their slot corner, so he doesn't play 100% of snaps like Tariq Woolen does. But that's 4 starting players at premium positions right there. And then obviously Kenneth Walker, who this is going to be a very difficult test for this Chargers team because he does everything that the Chargers defense struggles with, right? Like he forces missed tackles, he gets to the second level, and he has that game-breaking speed. So if you look at his numbers from last week, he didn't run for a ton of yards, but he forced 12 missed tackles in one game against the Cardinals last week, and he had 4 runs of 10 yards or more. So the Chargers are going to have to be on their assignment sound football again this week. Otherwise, Kenneth Walker could take one to the house and really kind of change this game. So it's been the theme of the season, right? Like, just don't give up these big plays. They did a really good job of it on Monday night, right? But that's Latavius Murray, who's been in the NFL for 15 years,
Latavius Murray, very different.
It's not Kenneth Walker. So this rookie class is really making an impact for the Seattle Seahawks. And as a draft fan of several of these players, it's been fun to see. I will say about Tariq Woolen, Arjun's coverage metrics that he shared with us basically have him as like the rookie version of what Trevon Diggs was last year. Not super efficient on a play-to-play basis, but he's had splash plays. So, we'll see what happens, if he's covering Mike Williams. That said, he was a project. They were not expecting him to be a starter, it sounded like, heading into the draft. So they're getting the splash plays. He's making a strong impact. He's just not super consistent, but I think you'll live with that based off of who you were drafting.
Yeah, 100%. That's great for them. That's probably the player, if he pans out, that I've been the most wrong about. And
100%.
You gamble on trades, and sometimes it's freaking awful, and sometimes it turns into Tariq Woolen, or at least the way he's been so far. So not bad.
Yeah, I'm always just leery of like the traits players who don't show like not that he didn't show like any good tape, right? But like, he didn't dominate at UTSA. So that to me was just like, okay, I don't really know. I don't see it here.
Right.
Like, I was lower on Trayvon Walker, but at least like you saw the ability, right? Like you saw the flashes. With Woolen, I never really felt that way. He also wasn't very good at the Senior Bowl. So he was not somebody I was super interested in drafting. But the Seahawks really have a knack for finding these corners and turning them into high-level players under Pete Carroll. And it certainly sounds like he's doing that again.
Yeah, we get Sawyer, so it's all good.
Hey, Jamari Sawyer has the best pass blocking efficiency rating of any rookie offensive tackle.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
I would have absolutely driven to Fresno and beaten the shit out of you if you told me that Jamari Sawyer at left tackle, after facing Myles Garrett as well, that was better in terms of the numbers than Neal, Cross, Iquanu, you name it. Like, that sounds insane. But whatever. Hey, man, I'll take it. Special kid.
Yeah, it's working. So, that's our Seattle Seahawks deep dive. So, All right, we'll get to the Charger side of things. Obviously, a lot of key takeaways here from this upcoming matchup. I think this is definitely not a matchup that people should be taking lightly. With the way this Seattle Seahawks offense is playing, again, they're very opportunistic Seattle Seahawks defense. So, Tyler, we'll start with you here. What's your biggest key matchup of the week?
I mean, honestly, how could it not be JC Jackson versus whichever receiver he's up against, whether that's DK, whether it's Tyler Lockett, whether it's Marquise Goodwin, whether it's their fifth wide receiver who might toast him for a touchdown because he's doing the wrong assignment. Like JC Jackson versus whoever is across from him is that matchup. They're going to play him this week. They said he is the starter, and they do kind of have to force it. People might say, oh, it's because of the money. But like, yeah, it kind of is. But also, JC Jackson is a good player somewhere in there. It's just not there mentally. He seems like he has a really good mentality heading into this week. I'm going to stay and watch film longer. I'll be the first guy in, the last guy out. I know some people on Twitter were like, well, why weren't you doing that already? He probably was. I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
I don't think this is a Kyler Murray situation by any means.
No, I don't think he's playing Call of Duty. Or if he is, please stop. Please stop doing that. I know you have a ton of money, but Metcalf, Lockett, both of them over 400 yards, each with 2 touchdowns. But I'm also really fascinated with this idea that Derwin James has 15 blitzes on the year, and JC has only been on the field for 3 of them. And, I saw in the game against Denver, Derwin, he would have him line up like he was going to rush the passer, and then he'd either go to the flat or cover a tight end or something. So it's like I think they were setting him up for the second half. And he did get that second half blitz and that sack. And maybe that's the case for every game. Maybe they are just trying to set up Derwin, get him to move a bit in the first half, and in the second half, unleash him. But I'm very fascinated by this idea that Derwin James isn't able to blitz when JC Jackson is on the field. It's small sample size, so it's very hard to tell, but I want to point it out now so I can revisit it at some point because is Derwin James out there babysitting JC Jackson a little bit? And granted, it didn't work on Monday Night Football either. But is he out there and unable to do the Derwin James things because he has to look out for JC Jackson? I mean, the whole point of bringing in JC or trading for Khalil Mack was to free up Derwin James and to weaponize Derwin James. And if JC Jackson's out there and he's struggling and they have to, like a tight end helping Trey Pipkins, put Derwin out there to help JC in some way, and that limits what he can do as a pass rusher, which he's freaking awesome at, I think it's notable. I don't know if it's a real thing. I have not watched the defensive film. Maybe it's just because they wanted to do that against the specific quarterbacks and the specific schemes when JC also happened to be out. But I couldn't help but notice. So it's notable because JC wasn't that great this past week, and they benched him because they do have to cover DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and also because, I want to see if Derwin is able to be, quote unquote, unleashed, even though JC is on the field and even potentially struggling.
Yeah, I mean, we could have led the show right with JC Jackson, so I'm glad you brought it up. This is a really dicey situation, like we talked about on Monday night after the game. It sounds like he's ready to really kind of fix his lack of confidence. He did kind of confirm that, and there's been a lot of speculation, right, about why he's kind of struggling, whether it was a schematic fit or whether he wasn't adapt to kind of move across the country or whatever. But, I felt like this was purely just all lack of confidence base, and he kind of confirmed as much today. So he said today that he felt defeated, right? That he was not in a great spot after being benched on Monday Night Football. And, somebody like him who's been this high profile player for the last few years and 25 interceptions over the last 4 seasons, I can understand, I can't relate, right? But I can understand where he's coming from, where he feels a certain way about his play and about being benched. So they're going to have to tread lightly this week, and be able to try and pump him up and get him back on track and play a good game this week against a really tough matchup in DK Metcalf. We'll see about Tyler Lockett. But Geno Smith is going to target him, right? Like Geno Smith and all these backup quarterbacks that throughout the league, like they target their best players. Like that's what the backups do, right? Like they're not trying to distribute the ball to 5, 6, 7, 8 players. They're trying to go at whoever is their best player. So this is a big game for JC Jackson. sounds like he's doing the work to get ready. And I hope this pans out because, like I said on Monday, this defense needs J.C. Jackson to be able to be at least close to his full potential right now and, get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people will want to see Michael Davis, and listen, first reception JC gives up on Sunday. I'm sure people will be calling for Michael Davis to go in, but like you said, and like everybody really knows, it's just tough right now to watch. The defense is better when JC's at his best. The defense needs turnovers. It needs more possessions for Justin Herbert. And JC does that. Michael Davis can be fundamentally sound and scheme sound, but he isn't much of a turnover getting forced incompletion kind of guy. Maybe he was at certain points, but really not right now. So JC playing his best is great. And again, I hope he does. It just might take some time, and that's okay. I'm not giving up on him. I think Popper pointed out in his live stream, JC was killing it in training camp. Like he was, and I said as much, a top player for them. As good as Bryce Callahan was in camp, JC was just as good on the outside. Now, maybe covering Mike Williams all the time makes you look a bit better because you don't have to deal with a whole lot. But still, that's a lot there. And he did hold his own and looked fantastic. So it's there. Something changed with the surgery. Maybe it was the injury for a couple of weeks. Now it's just a mentality thing, whatever. Something changed from there. And I think, one good game, even just the bye week, could change everything for this defense.
Yeah, and like you said, this offense with all the injuries that we're talking about, like they could use a couple extra possessions each week. And if JC is able to do that, that'd be fantastic. So I don't know if they'll experiment with him in the slot or something else like that. He did do that a little bit with the Patriots. That's why I don't really buy like this being like a schematic issue. I mean, if you really know the Patriots defense, like they change coverage schemes like basically every other week. And J.C. Jackson was able to handle all of that, play in the slot sometimes, play outside, shadow opposing number one receivers. So this is just J.C. needs to get back to what he is able to do, and I think it just is all a confidence thing for him. So I apologize. I did this backwards. We usually do victory formation first, and we didn't do the show last week, so we're doing key matchups first. For me, this Chargers interior defensive line, like honestly, might be the best part of the Chargers defense right now, which is crazy to really think about where this defensive roster was heading into the season. But so this is my key matchup of the week: the Chargers interior defensive line against the Seattle Seahawks offensive line, specifically the interior offensive line, of course. Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph-Day, each in the top 15 in run stop percentage right now. Morgan Fox and Jerry Tillery in the top 15 in PFF's pass rushing efficiency metric, which is crazy. I can't believe the turnaround that Jerry Tillery has had over the last few weeks. But this interior defensive line is playing well. They've had some flashes from Otito Ogbonia. They've had some flashes from Christian Covington. And this theoretically should be a matchup that they are able to dominate this week against the Seattle Seahawks. I mentioned Austin Blythe, the free agent. He's a fine center. He's not like Corey Linsley, but he's a center that Sebastian Joseph-Day, Otito Ogbonia should be able to control pretty heavily at the point of attack. Gabe Jackson, who obviously, like I mentioned, former Raider. When he was with the Raiders, he was a dominant player, but he is not the same as he used to be. So as Jacob points out, Gabe Jackson could also miss this game. And then you have Damian Lewis, who, is not really panned out to be the kind of guard that they drafted. They drafted him before the offensive scheme shift. So he's kind of more of like an old school, bigger guard as opposed to like the mobile guard that this scheme really kind of requires. So this is not a great interior offensive line for the Seahawks. And, the way that the Chargers defensive line is playing, they should take advantage of this matchup. And really, the Chargers defense needs it because we talked about Kenneth Walker. We talked about Geno Smith in the passing attack. This interior defensive line needs to show up and be able to stop the run, create long third downs, and allow this defensive staff to really dial up the designer blitzes. So for me, everything starts with this, specifically the four defensive linemen of Sebastian Joseph-Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, and Jerry Tillery.
Yeah, you highlighted it right there with the designer blitzes. It doesn't work if you don't care about the interior defensive lineman across from you. but it does. I mean, listen, players playing well equals good defense. Yeah, sure. But I mean, like the Chargers have been at their best on defense when these interior guys have brought it. And of course, having Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, like against the Chiefs, for example, definitely helps. But man, I would say this interior defensive line group, based on the way they've played recently, with Otito in the lineup, I would also add, no offense to Covington, but it just looks a little bit different with Otito right now. Based on the way Jerry Tillery has come along, the way Morgan Fox is able to rush the passer, the way Otito's been a bit of a plug, I don't want to say resurgence for Sebastian Joseph Day, but after a quiet start, he's come along strong. Austin Johnson being strong. I would say this is probably their best position group right now with everybody healthy.
I could get behind that on the whole team, you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like edge 3, 4, I have concerns with, especially with Joey out. DBs, I think, should be a strength, but it's not right now. It's not receiver. It's not line right now with Slater out and some guys out. I think it's their best group. And listen, Jerry Tillery, we'll talk shit on him all day long for how bad he was in certain spots. Like you said, Jerry Tillery is a top, granted on a smaller role, a top pass rushing defensive tackle right now. Like his pass rush win rate is good and his productivity is really good. I'm not saying it earns him a second contract with the Chargers, but listen, he's off to a really, really good start. Maybe not much the first couple of games, but 9 pressures or whatever it is the last 3 weeks and a sack. It's a really, really nice role for him, for Morgan Fox. He's playing very, very well. They're playing very, very well. They're going to need it against Geno Smith and the Seahawks. They're going to need it. But that's just the way things are right now. Against Kenneth Walker, Geno Smith, all these guys, they're going to need it. And hey, I'm all for it. I think this group, amazing what happens when you put the interior defensive line coach of the year with the interior defensive lineman. It's amazing how much better they look than last year.
Yeah.
Granted, they spent a lot of money on upgrades as well.
Yeah, Jay Rogers and this coaching staff, of course, Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley going out and getting these guys, they deserve a lot of credit for the way that this interior defensive line has turned over, right? Like I think there's obviously a lot of negativity around the coaching staff right now, but the one thing that we knew they had to do heading into the offseason was fix the defensive line. And for the most part, they've done that. Like if Joey Bosa were healthy right now, I think we'd be talking about a top 6 to 8 defensive line, in the league right now. Unfortunately, him dealing with the groin injury. So this interior defensive line group is playing fantastic, man. And I wanted to highlight them tonight because this is a matchup that they should be able to control and win. And I think if you really go back and watch the game on Monday night, it really started to flip once Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day kind of settled in, got some run stops on Latavius Murray. We saw that beautiful rep from Sebastian Joseph Day where he completely tossed Cushionberry to the side and made a tackle for loss. So they're tone setters for this defense as a whole. Obviously, Sebastian Joseph Day is a captain, right? But this should be a game where this quartet, if you will, plus we'll see what they do with that 5th spot. It should be a game where they play very well, and the Chargers definitely need that to happen.
Mm-hmm. The word on the whole Otito versus Covington thing was basically, I don't know. There was no real rhyme or reason for it. They had Covington for a couple of weeks, or they had Otito first, then Covington, now Otito. So I couldn't tell you who was going to be there on Sunday, to be completely honest. I have no idea. But yeah, I kind of hope it's Otito.
It kind of felt like they want Christian Covington to be like the pass rushing kind of player, and then Otito for the run. But then they put Covington against the Browns. I don't understand what they're doing with that 5th spot. But again, they deserve a lot of credit for the way that this interior defensive line has been playing. The additions have panned out very, very well for them. So we'll get to our victory formation here. Tyler, what is the one thing you need to see happen for the Chargers to be able to come out victorious against the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, I feel like with Lombardi, I think he does a very good job of pivoting to something they needed to change after the game, after 2 games or whatever. Like they recognized what they did wrong. Here's what we could do going into the week. But I feel like in game, there's just something missing. Now, granted, if half your team all of a sudden gets hurt, you're down to Brendan Hymas and 2 guys have concussions and Kelly gets hurt on kickoffs. I get why the game plan is tough to implement because you literally are just losing guys. You have no idea who's going to be in. But I think going into this game, like maybe it's tough to do in game, but going into this game, you're probably going to be stuck with depth. Unless things turn around and it's amazing for the Chargers health-wise, you're probably stuck with depth. And it sucks. But explore it. Like, what can Michael Bandy do if you're intentional with his targets and his touches? Not just, oh God, he's got to go in now. Let's kind of make him do some Josh Palmer stuff. Like, what if you're really intentional and you actually game plan Michael Bandy plays, some targets, something? If this happens, and we haven't even talked about this yet, but what can Isaiah Spiller do as a receiving back if he beats out Larry freaking Roundtree, on a wheel or an angle route? What does that look like? Explore it. What if you game plan DeAndre Carter as a feature part of the week? You might not have Josh Palmer. You might not have Keenan. Oh, you don't have Keenan Allen. What if you game plan DeAndre Carter as like a feature part of the week? Not just the 4th guy, not just the 3rd guy, but he's a feature part of the week. What does John Hightower do? If you put him in the game, you add speed to your offense. What does that do for the calls you can make? Does that make Herbert look more comfortable? I don't know. It seemed like they wanted to get Xander Horvath involved in the passing game more last week. Herbert, throw it to him. Don't hesitate. And if it comes down to it, what does Joe Reed do for you? I want to see this team. They might lose this game because they are going to, especially if more injuries happen in game, they might run out of players and they just cannot score because it's Herbert throwing to himself, taking snaps from Corey Linsley. So explore this depth. You have a bye week coming up. See what works, because you're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to get injuries throughout the rest of the year. Go for it. This is not like an all-in, see what, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks scenario, but give some guys a shot. Give some guys, like, I know Mike Williams is your feature. They're probably going to have him as that feature X versus Tariq Woolen, and I get it. But let's be intentional about some of these depth pieces and see what you have. Because when everyone comes back after the bye, if you know what you can do with these other guys now, you have a really, really deep roster, in my opinion. Not that Michael Bandy is the greatest depth ever, not that Xander Horvath is, as your RB3 is the greatest thing ever, but like, know what you can do with these guys. And then coming out of the bye with Keenan, with everyone healthy, you can do maybe a little bit more. So I would love to see them explore their depth and do something intentionally with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I felt like the overall game plans against Houston and the Browns were fantastic. I thought the offense was doing some really cool things in the run game. I thought they were getting the ball to Mike Williams in really fantastic ways, and more on that in a second. And the offense was playing really, really well. And then obviously last week, watching it back, I haven't watched the film yet. I rewatched the broadcast angle. But it felt like as soon as everybody started getting hurt, it was like, oh shit, let's just do a ton of screen passes, run stick, and we'll just see what happens. So like you said, being able to make some adjustments in game, I think is absolutely crucial. So we'll see what happens with this receiver group, right? I don't think they have a choice but to sign Michael Bandy to the active roster at this point, which should benefit them for the season as a whole. So I know that there's been some confusion about what they're able to do with Michael Bandy. So I'll address this really quickly, and then I'll give my point. But the NFL changed their practice squad elevation rules again this year. They changed it because of COVID, and then they changed it again this year. So you get to elevate a player 3 times from the practice squad, and then after that 3rd time, they either have to stay on your practice squad the rest of the season, or you waive them, and then you can restart that 3 elevation cycle again. But obviously they would be subject to waivers, and you never know if somebody would pick up Michael Bandy in this case. Or you sign them to the active roster, and then obviously they're a part of the 53-man roster. That's what they did with Richard Rodgers. They did that pretty much on Friday, I want to say, is kind of the deadline. So we'll see what happens with Josh Palmer probably not playing this week. I think you probably have to sign into the active roster. But outside of that, I think they need to kind of, like you said, test the waters with John Hightower, test the waters with Joe Reed, like Keelan Doss. Like, I don't know. Like, let's see somebody besides Jason Moore get in this game and see what they can do. So it's going to have a bit of a preseason feel from a skill player perspective. So I'm hopeful that Joe Lombardi, with a whole week with these guys, can come up with a good game plan. Like you said, week to week, I think he makes some good adjustments. After the bye week, he'll make some good adjustments. It's just that his biggest weakness, right, as a coach, is that he does not have the ability to make in-game adjustments and pivot in-game. So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
My key to victory is kind of an extension of that. I hinted at it a little bit. I need to see Mike Williams be featured again. Like, I don't understand. Like, watching the game back, it felt like they could have at least tested him a little bit, him being Patrick Surtain, and they just didn't, right? Until the very end of the game, when it was like, okay, we can't really move the ball, so let's just throw it up to Mike Williams and see what happens. And then obviously they had that scramble drill at the same time. So I need to see Mike Williams be featured in this game, because they don't have any other options I trust, especially if Gerald Everett is not playing with his illness, but also just because the Seattle Seahawks secondary it's not intimidating to me at all. This would have been a great week to have Keenan Allen back, because Kobe Bryant is giving up receptions at one of the highest levels in the league out of the slot. And Tariq Woolen, I mentioned this earlier, he's getting some splash plays for them, and he's a rookie prospect, right? But he's given up a lot of yards, a very high passer rating when he's not intercepting the ball. So this should absolutely be a week where you come up with some creative ways to get Mike Williams the ball. I'm not talking about just like throw him a bunch of jump balls. I don't know if I would do that against Tariq Woolen.
Right.
Give the rookie opportunities. But if you go back and watch that Houston game, they were really deliberate with the way that they were moving Mike Williams around, slants, crossers, deep overs. And I think that's what you have to do this week, and just give Mike Williams some freebies. They used him on that slide route, got him out in space. I need to see Houston Mike Williams for this team to win, because frankly, I don't know how else they're going to move the ball if Mike Williams is not getting 15 targets on Sunday. So it sounds simple to just like have the key to victory be like, hey, throw the ball to Mike Williams, but I just don't see how they move the ball without that happening, with all of these injuries that are just, all over the place with this team right now.
Yeah, this is not Patrick Surtain and Justin Simmons, who I'm sure were just that, like, they had one assignment, I'm sure, the entire game, and that was it. Not that the Seattle Seahawks won't try to do the same thing. It's just not the same guys. Against Houston, they were so much, again, intentional with getting him the ball. They pivoted and said, listen, okay, we tried to do this kind of same sort of offense that we kind of had with Keenan. But no, it's like, let's be intentional with getting him the ball, and not just like against the Chiefs where it's like, okay, a curl, a go, a curl, a go. Yeah. It was, let's get him involved, in the play action, shallow crossers. Let's get him involved in the slot from a slant. Let's get him involved from the outside on a slant. It seemed like they were trying to get him more involved intentionally, and they're going to have to, because it doesn't look pretty when you don't get Mike Williams the ball right now without Keenan Allen. They have to find a way to do it. And listen, okay, even if that is go balls to Mike Williams, you got to give him a shot. Like, you can't just like, I know Patrick Surtain is one of the best corners in the league. You could arguably he's the best corner in the league, but you are also paying your receiver $20 million. You at least have to try. And if that ends up in an interception, oh well. If Tariq Woolen gets an interception, it happens. But you at least have to try, because the flip side of that, of course, is Mike Williams, who is very good at doing those 50-50 sort of things. So some attempt, some shot, intentionally, on a fade, whatever, I don't care. Just try to get him a bit more involved. And I think they will, but like I said, I would also like to see them explore their depth. So maybe they won't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you can do both, right? I just think you need to really feature Mike Williams in a non-go ball way. Like, be creative with how you're using him. You're paying him $20 million. Like, let's get him the ball in space. Let's get him in the ball in deep overs and see what happens. I think, again, kind of like an extension of that, I think they get a little too like distribute the ball-y in the red zone. Like, I think they are like, let's try and get Xander here. Let's try and get Everett here. Let's get Parham here. Let's get DeAndre Carter here. Like, once you get to the red zone, just feed your money players. That's what they did last year. It was a lot of Austin Eckler. There was a lot of Keenan Allen, a lot of Mike Williams. And I think they just kind of need to get back to that. Like, you don't have to try and create, touchdowns for DeAndre Carter. Like, just give the ball to your best players, especially when everybody else is injured. So, I think you just have to feed Eckler, feed Mike Williams, and let your best players on offense make plays.
Yeah. We're going to get 1 target to Donald Parham and then 3 Larry Roundtree short yardage handoffs.
Man, I understand special teams is important. Absolutely. I get it. You have no pass catchers. Like, just play Isaiah Spiller for the love of God. Like, they haven't made the decision right, but Isaiah Spiller was great as a pass catcher this summer, and I don't think you have a choice. Like, you might have to put Austin Eckler at receiver. So let's get Isaiah Spiller some action.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to solve what you're doing this week is put Eckler as a receiver. They finally try to get him more involved on those angle routes out of the backfield, which is like, yeah, the Broncos linebackers were hurt and not that great anyway. Do that. But yeah, Spiller, I'm hoping it's coach speak. But to even suggest that Larry Roundtree does have a shot is a bit tough because he did. Like in the summer, they were going Eckler as the primary, Kelly was the first of the second backs out, but Spiller was just a receiving back for them for the most part. And then unfortunately, he had no real opportunity to separate in the preseason. So I don't know, man. Like it's a coin flip for me. The right answer, I feel, is Isaiah Spiller. At the same time, I can justify why they go with Larry Roundtree. They might.
All I know is that Joshua Kelly and Sony Michel have combined for 19 total targets in 6 weeks. So if they come out and target Larry Roundtree instead of getting Isaiah Spiller the football in that role, I'm going to be upset.
I guess we'll see.
Oh man!
Oh, look at we made it 57 minutes before we got to the Fire Lombardi stuff. Almost. Jared Cook better than all of our tight ends. No cap. Okay.
Did we watch Jared Cook play last year? Did we watch the same player?
Sorry, that was my one call out of the day. I apologize. I didn't mean to just pick on that guy.
No, that's okay. In terms of Staley not firing Lombardi, I think both of us and Alex are on the same page of not firing the coach right now. But also, Joe Lombardi was not Brandon Staley's first choice. Like he tried to get Kevin O'Connell, he tried to get Shane Waldron, and then once he wasn't able to get, he tried to get Mike McDaniel, which would have been fucking awesome. Can you imagine Mike McDaniel with this team? Oh man, that'd be fun. So I don't think that there's any kind of allegiance to Joe Lombardi. However, that's not the issue with the team, and that's not the coordinator that I would be focusing on firing, in my opinion.
Yeah. We'll see. Staley certainly has earned some credit after beating up on the 31st points per game offense. But yeah, definitely need to see more from Staley for sure. To me, the thing with Lombardi, and we've talked about this in the Discord or even just, to each other, I think the thing with Lombardi that people forget is that he's an offensive coordinator. And yeah, he's a play caller, but he is an offensive coordinator. And to me, you talk about the development of all these players, like all of these players, the fact the line, they can draft linemen, they can sign linemen, they can develop linemen. All of his coaches seem to be doing a pretty solid job. Everyone's having career years. Like there is also that part to Joe Lombardi. I know people are bored with the play calling, and I absolutely get that. But I think
same.
Like, is Shane Day really? People are saying, Shane Day could do better with Justin Herbert. I don't know how we know that for sure. Awesome. Optimus Ryan, by the way, asking for a link to the GAC Discord. Don't share the link with people. That is for YouTube members and Patreon supporters. Not that I'm trying to kick you out of the group or anything, just letting you know. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Staley shouldn't fire Joe Lombardi. Frankly, last year and potentially this year, depending how it goes, it's the offense is kind of the reason Staley might still have his job. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to being an offensive coordinator than just calling deep shots. And I understand, again, the offense on Monday in particular was not great. But if you really go back and watch the Cleveland Browns game and then go back and watch like the Raiders game, you're watching a completely different rushing attack, right? Like they are doing very different things in the run game. And up until, I mean, it worked okay on Monday night, but they were doing some really cool shit on Monday or against the Browns, from a run game perspective. So, again, Joe Lombardi generally has some good answers week to week. They made a lot of good adjustments after the bye week last year. I understand he gets a little boring sometimes, 100%. but it could be much, much worse. Like, watch other teams and see what you are watching on a week to week basis, and then watch Joe Lombardi and what they're able to do with their schematic thing. So, yeah, I think Joe Lombardi is probably safe on this team, but we'll see. All right, Tyler, we'll wrap up tonight's show with our bold predictions. I think I'll go first here. I think let's see, how do I want to phrase this? We know how Khalil Mack has been able to dominate some weaker competition. And I don't know if going with Khalil Mack is a bold prediction here, but it feels like he's due for a big game. And he had a good game against the Broncos for sure. But I think he's going to put this rookie tackle duo in a really tough spot. So I think we see at least 3 sacks from Khalil Mack on Sunday afternoon.
Wow. Okay. Hey, I'm all for it. I was talking to Jason, our former co-host from years ago now, it seems, that Khalil Mack, when he brought this up, that Khalil Mack is playing better than Joey Bosa ever has. I sort of agree and disagree, but what it really is with Khalil is Joey Bosa is, I'm sure even the numbers said before he got hurt, the better win rate, maybe more pressures and stuff like that. There's just something about Khalil Mack finishing plays and changing the game that Joey absolutely can do. But there's something about Khalil and the fact that he does get that sack. He does change that game. He does force the fumble or whatever it is. Again, I'm not trying to slander Joey Bosa. I love the dude. And I think, frankly, I still would put Joey ahead of Khalil. But yeah, Khalil, man, 3 sacks. I'm all for it. That's a bold prediction.
I wasn't sure if 3 sacks from Khalil Mack would be bold, but I can understand him being like more clutch, I guess, if you want to say that, being a better finisher, because I think that is true. But after really studying Joey Bosa in the summer, like, to me, there's Myles Garrett and his brother and maybe Micah Parsons now this year, that were better than Joey. So I think overall, Joey he does so many great things from a technical standpoint that you have to just be completely on your game every single snap. And Khalil's not that guy. Like, Khalil is much more of a power rusher. So you don't necessarily have to be completely on top of your technique on a snap to snap basis like you do against Joey. So if you want to talk about like Joey being like more effective on a play to play basis and Mac being like more of a game wrecker, I think that's fair, because Mac is just such a physical presence. But Joey, to me, like I said, like, I think there's an argument that he's the best edge rusher in the league, but he's definitely in the top 3 or 4. Whereas Mac, to me, I feel like is probably top 10.
Yeah, not bad. Doing pretty good there. My bold prediction, did I want to go defense? I was going to say something flashy on defense. I will say that because of what I said, not because of what I said, but going the same line of what I was talking about with the depth, I think DeAndre Carter cracks 100 yards this game.
Whew.
If Josh Palmer does not play. I feel like if he does play, that changes things. But if Palmer's not playing, and it doesn't really sound like he will with this concussion, Carter gets over 100 total yards, not including special teams.
Not including special teams. How are you feeling about DeAndre Carter as a returner, by the way?
As a kick returner, I have no idea what happens, because I've never seen a guy run into hard contact more than I have Carter in kickoff returns, which is weird because his punt returns are pretty good. Like, he gets, just, I don't know what the numbers are, but it looks like he's a pretty solid punt returner. Kick returns, I don't know why or what. Maybe it's a blocking thing, and they are trying to install new guys. Last year it was someone like Chris Rumpf. Now I think it's Xander, and I think it was Kelly as the wings. So maybe that changes. But yeah, as a kickoff returner, his numbers aren't good. And we're watching it now where it's like every return, you might as well just take a knee or let somebody else do it. And I really think that somebody else kind of has to at some point, because it's not looking super hot right now. I think it's 19 yards a kickoff return. I don't know if you're looking up the numbers.
I am right now, yeah.
Heading into the game, I think last week it was 19. Then against the Browns, he had 2 returns for an average of 19 and a half. Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so you have, obviously, you filter it to 20%, because then you'll get Like Taysom Hill has a kick return for some reason. I don't know what happened there. But if you filter it to 20% of the returns, DeAndre Carter is 30th in yards per average. So a lot of the guys that I wanted to return kicks are not doing much better. And obviously Andre Roberts is hurt for the Panthers right now. Man, Devin Duvernay's at 36.6 per return. My God, that's awesome.
That's fun.
I love Devin Duvernay at Texas. Wanted him so badly. But yeah, DeAndre Carter as a return has been a bit of a disappointment. Maybe that's because he's a full-time starter now and he's not fresh, but
yeah,
I don't know. Something to monitor, I think, throughout the rest of the season, though.
100%. I think it's a change can they afford to make it? Like, they're not that invested in DeAndre Carter. This isn't like JC where they have to force the issue.
Sure.
I think you see another game of it and maybe things change. If not with Carter after the bye, then potentially with the guys that are blocking. Although I guess if Kelly was the wing, then it literally will have to change. But we'll see who that is. Maybe it's Fehoko again.
Do we know who the second returner is? Jacob Webb saying Jasir. I don't know if Jasir ever got any reps as the returner.
So it was in camp, and granted, you could keep everyone. It was Carter, and then it was Joe Reed.
Okay.
So, I mean, if he even gets, but he's also buried on the receiver depth chart.
Yeah.
So it would be him, and then technically after that, it was Callahan and Bandy. So
I'd be in favor of pivoting to Bandy
until he gets absolutely murdered by some 6'7" tight end. We'll see. I mean, I think they do have to try something though, because it is, you can't. Half the drives I'm watching, it's 1st and 10 at the 19, and then Zion Johnson gets a 10-yard holding penalty against the Broncos, and it's like, oh, cool, we're 1st and 19 now. That's great. Why can't we score? So
yeah, I think the early returns from Ryan Ficken, I think are generally very positive. They jumped up after the fumble from 22nd in special teams DVOA to 15th. So that was a good week for special teams overall. But their return unit is definitely the weakest. Not punt return. Punt return's good. DeAndre Carter as a punt return is much better.
Yeah,
in a much better standing there. But kickoff return is definitely the one biggest weakness of special teams right now.
Yeah. Although, what are they at in special teams DVOA? Like 15th?
It's 15th overall. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But
everyone's like in the 10 to 15 range, all three groups.
Yep. Yeah. So I think overall, the Chargers had this goal of becoming like a more balanced team. I think they have relatively accomplished that mission. Special teams unit playing really well. J.K. Scott I think he's second in the league in hang time average right now. Like, he's doing some great things. That first punt on Monday night was atrocious, but the other punts were really good, man. So, they've taken a good step forward with most of their special teams units. If they're able to get, maybe a dynamic return man next year in the draft or something like that, then I think we'll really start to see Ryan Ficken, start to establish himself as a much better special teams coach. That quote that Daniel Popper was talking about from Jasir Taylor afterwards, that Ryan Ficken was coaching Jasir and Dean Leonard to do what they did at the end, man. Like, that's fantastic coaching. And then obviously Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard get a ton of credit for executing it.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, half of us didn't even know that was legal.
I had no idea. I was like, that's a penalty.
Yeah, to me, it's like you can't do that. But not only could you do that, that wasn't an accident. That's huge. That to me buys Ficken a year, 2 years of my grace, because that means you are understanding so much of what's going on. High IQ plays, high IQ players. Jaw Taylor, man, it's like Ficken, J.K. Scott, Jaw Taylor. That match right now is really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to give a shout out to something that Brandon Staley said after the game. Again, not many people probably noticed this, but I noticed it. He said that Nick Neiman and Josh Harris, like, together are the leaders of the special teams unit. So we haven't heard a ton of Nick Neiman. I don't think he's necessarily getting a ton of tackles right now. But to hear Brandon Staley talk about Nick Neiman in that way as being like the leader of the special teams unit, was something that really stood out to me. Again, I'm weird like that, and I focus on things like that. But I'd love to hear Nick Niemann, being a leader on special teams. I think that's fantastic for him.
Yeah, that's really cool, and really credit to, not that they've had a ton of turnover on special teams, but Hopkins gets hurt. You have a new punter, you have a new long snapper. All this, the moves they made, like, they've paid off. This is looking a lot better so far, and I'm happy to see it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's going to do it for our show tonight. We'll have, again, Arjun's analytics are going to be going up tomorrow, and then we are going to do our usual Saturday Q&A where we'll have some of our final thoughts on the matchup. We'll hopefully have a lot of more clarity on the injuries that day. Hopefully Odell Beckham Jr. is not a member of the Kansas City Chiefs by then. That's going to suck really badly, but we'll see what happens there. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out for this evening?
I couldn't find my mouse to hit unmute. I'll finally be able to go to the game, so I'm really happy I'll be able to go. I've missed the last couple for various reasons. I'll be able to go. Also, in about 3 hours, it is my fiance's birthday, so happy birthday to my fiance Janae. Yes, honey, hi, happy birthday. She's right there.
That's awesome, man. Shout out to Janae, great human being, very supportive of the podcast, as is Brooke. So hope she has a great birthday. So really excited for this game. I think it's going to be a much more offensively driven matchup between these two teams. So should be a lot more points on the board. We'll have all of that covered throughout the rest of the week. And all I have to say is this bye week cannot get here fast enough, man. This Chargers team needs a week off. So hopefully we can get some more, get a little bit more healthy on the roster. So, like I said, that's going to do it for us today. Hopefully, if you are a baseball fan, your team wins, I guess. I don't know. The Mariners lost, so I don't really care. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Alex and the Phillies and the Padres and stuff like that. So, as always, if you are listening to this, please leave a rating or review. Always appreciate that feedback as well. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.